Okay, so this is work in progress number 2 for the 1/35th Assault Suit Leynos kit. As you can see, I've disassembled the arms because I need to do a little bit of seam line removal. And what I'm talking about is where two parts meet each other either side, and it's showing a bit of a gap where there shouldn't be. Can't see it that well there, unfortunately, but hey ho, you get the idea. So these two are the forearms, and I'm going to have to remove the gap that's on the front cuffs here and here. So that's got to have its seam lines removed. The other thing I've got to do is there's these tiny cylinders that sit above the shoulders. There also are two parts that meet each other, and I'll demonstrate here how they go together. And there you can see how these two pieces sandwich together, and they create this seam line in between it. And that's also going to need filling in and fixing, so it's just one continuous cylinder. Also got to do some seam line removal on this weapon. Along the top here there's a great big long seam line along the back there, you can see it quite clearly, and a little bit underneath here as well. That's going to need removing. These shoulders, however, are a little bit more complex. They are these two pieces that come together here and form a seam line across the top, but they also enclose parts, as you can see on this shoulder here. And it's going to be pretty difficult to paint these if I've closed the seam line here. So what I've done is, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to remove all of these internal parts first, paint these up, then I'll stick them inside here, and then do a seam line removal. Now there's lots of other ways you can do this. You could do it by a method called C-sectioning, which is, if I can briefly demonstrate, where this would connect inside here, like this. You would actually cut a small notch in this circle so that this part could literally be popped in afterwards. And normally quite a straightforward thing to do, but I just prefer to sandwich it all together and then mask it off afterwards for when I remove the seam line and paint the shoulder piece. So a bit of a long-winded way of doing it, but it's just the way that I'm used to doing it, and the masking in this case is not going to be all that complicated, so that's the way it's going to be done. So for removing seam lines, I normally use either this standard Tamiya cement, or I will use this Tamiya extra thin cement. This is especially good if you've already got pieces sandwiched together and you want to get a tiny amount of glue to drip into a very small gap in a corner or something. So in general I do this first, and be very liberal with it, put quite a lot on, make sure it squidges through the gaps to form a nice squidgy bond, and then I'll leave it for 24 hours to fully cure. So let's go ahead and remove some seam lines on this cuff. Okay, so I'm going to get my Tamiya cement and I'm going to apply it over the pieces that's going to be sandwiched. Now once I've sandwiched that in, make sure it's got a good bond, then I will get a clamp and just stick that on there, just as a bit of insurance to ensure that it forms a nice bond. There we go. And it's coming a little bit loose there, so let's overkill it with another clamp. Sorted. Right, now let's do the same for the other forearm. And there we go, that's all of the arm parts and the main weapon all now glued together successfully. I'm going to leave this now for 24 hours, and then it's time to get sanding and puttying where required. Okay, so it's been a couple of days now, and the glue has finished curing on these parts here. And what I'm doing in the minute is just going over all of the parts where it's a bit gluey, like around here and around here, and just sanding it all down to make a nice smooth surface. Now this is not going to be absolutely perfect, I might add. It might get rid of most of the seam line, but there will always be a teeny tiny amount of line in there somewhere, and you can see it quite clearly on the back here. And this is where I've been doing my sanding. So I've finished sanding all around this part, and I applied some putty, and I just used this Tamiya basic type putty, and I applied it using just a cocktail stick. Put a bit on this piece of paper here and just applied it on, and then I left that for a good couple of hours to cure, and I'm going to sand that down just to make a nice smooth and flat surface, so it just fills in any gaps that the gluing has missed, especially here on the buttress and just here on the front clip of this part here. Now I've removed all of the seam lines, so I've got all of the grey pieces, and I've primed them all in black primer, and I've used this, which is Ultimate Primer. And the next thing to do is to give it a base coat of black, and of course just give it a good look over to make sure that all of the seam lines that I wanted to be removed have now been removed. I also primed all of the beige pieces into grey, same Ultimate Primer again, and again I'm just checking over to make sure that all of the seam lines are completely invisible. Okay, so I'm at a stage now where I need to make some colour choices. So what I've decided to go with is this highly interesting grey colour scheme, which is going to consist of steel, Mr. Colour Steel, which is going to be used for some weapons and some inner workings. Mr. Colour Black, just as a base coat. I'm going to use light grey, again as a base coat for the armour parts. I'm going to use this light gold grey, which is kind of slightly green grey, for some armour parts again, and a good old neutral grey for some inner frame stuff. I've also got Mr. Colour Yellow that I'm going to use for some warning paintwork here and there. I've got some Alclad 2 semi-matte aluminium that I'm going to use on some joints and some inner workings of the weapon, and I'm just going to stick to this group of paints. And this is going to be weathered, this kit, so I'm probably going to use some MIG engine fuel and oil, a bit of engine grime in there, and I'm going to use some of this chipping fluid to get that effect. And I'm going to use this MIG acrylic colour chipping and a bit of silver just to expose any metal that's been worn away. So you can see here I've finished doing the first base coat of the main weapon. I've not done any masking yet, and I just did a base coat of Mr. Colour Black, and then I've just gone over it in a neutral grey just to give it a bit of depth in a kind of a post shade. The next thing to do is to mask off some inner detail here just to make it a bit more interesting. I'm going to do this in kind of a matte aluminium to match what I've done with the barrel here. And here is the barrel. It's been base coated in some matte aluminium, and I've just very lightly gone over the top in some exhaust manifold just to give it a bit of heat damage. Here you can see how the armour is going to look. I've done the base painting on this as well. It's just base coated in black, and then I've gone over the top in that kind of green grey colour. I've done the shading quite heavy on this one, just because I want it to have a good amount of contrast, especially when I'm going to go over most of the edges in a kind of rust or exposed metal along the edges, just to make it look like it's seen its fair share of battles. And here's the other tone of grey, much lighter tone. I'm going to mask off a few areas, just for maybe some stripe decoration or some kind of like a regimental style markings on the kit. And I'm going to do that with the light grey over the top of the greeny grey. with some parts completely light grey, like this. This is like the hood that goes over the top of the head. And what I'm doing now is just doing some more seam line removal on the main body. Here's all of the inner frame parts here. I've also got lots of seam line removal to do over here. This is the backpack. There's nearly every single piece needs to have a seam line removed. So I'm going to paint all of the inner frame parts first, put it all inside, then mask it off, then remove the seam lines, and then I can get on with painting. And that's it for me for now. Thank you for watching, and I will see you again next time. Bye bye.